Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Dr. Tom LaHue. We're going to be talking about the Enneagram, and specifically our topic is church attendance, about going to church and why sometimes this might be difficult for us, or why we might get out of the habit of going to church, why it might be unappealing to us. Is it predictable based on your Enneagram type why you might no longer attend a church or no longer feel like going to church is a priority? So we're going to start by jumping into the basic topic of why sometimes people might quit going to churches. And then when we're finished covering those basic things, we're going to move to each Enneagram type and kind of look at it through that lens. So before we get started, just a reminder, in the description below is a link to my website, tomlahue.com. I do offer Enneagram coaching. I offer a program called Present to Life. It's a 3-month program designed specifically around you. It also is very focused on relationships. So if relationships is a challenge or you're having problems in your marriage, please reach out to me. You don't have to do this alone. I would love to work with you. I'd love to walk with you through this process, help you understand more about yourself, and improve your relationships. The Enneagram is a great tool to help us know more about ourselves and also to relate better to the people that we love in our lives. Also have a lot of courses coming up. I have courses online on Zoom that I offer, and you don't have to miss any session because I record every session and send it to you after the course date. And I have a lot of on-demand classes. So check out my website, tomlahue.com, if you're interested in the Enneagram, you want to learn more. So let's talk about churches and church attendance. Now, as you guys know, my background is in church ministry. I've been a pastor for over 30 years, and all of my education, my training comes out of that background. And I've been working in the local church for a long time. And I understand when people say that they are burned out on churches, or that churches have hurt them, or there's abuse in churches. Believe me, I get it. I understand. I've experienced that myself, and unfortunately probably have been the reason why some people may have quit going to church over the years. That's a horrible thing to think about, but I'm sure that, I'm not going to make everybody happy, and there's going to be people that, Tom, you didn't talk to me when I said hello to you, or Tom, you missed my appointment at the hospital, and you don't really care. And I'm sure in 30 years of ministry, there's been times that I've let people down, as we all will. We all will let each other down. But I want to focus on why people might quit going to church. And obviously, before we even get into this list, it could just be reality is you're not a Christian. And if you're not a Christian, then why would you go to church? You probably wouldn't. You might attend, some kind of other social gathering, but why would you go to church if you weren't a Christian? That's kind of so obvious that I don't even know if I should mention it, but maybe I should mention it. You can't expect people who aren't Christians or believers to go and be interested in the things that Christians and believers do. Okay, so let's go down a list first of all and just kind of talk about this topic. Here's 10 reasons why people might no longer attend church, or might no longer find themselves compelled to wake up on Sundays and go to church, or Saturday nights now, or Thursday nights, whenever your church is offered. And then we want to then give special attention to the Enneagram and go down a list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just kind of focus on each of the types and why there might be this disconnection with church. So the number one reason that I've got why people may no longer feel inclined to attend a church is disagreements with the doctrine of that church. In other words, I don't align personally with the belief system of this church. Now, it could be minor things like their view on end times and eschatology, or it might be they speak in tongues and I don't understand that or appreciate that, or it could be they have female pastors, or they don't have female pastors. There's so many reasons why people may not feel like they align with a church's teaching. It can be big things like end times, or the role of baptism in the service in a person's life, but disagreement with the basic theological position of that church could cause you to say, I don't know that I can really attend here anymore and support this because I don't believe in Calvinism, for example, or I don't believe in some of the doctrines that they're promoting in this church. Maybe they've taken a huge right turn or a huge left turn, and you feel like you've kind of been left behind. And it's hard for you to see yourself going to, for example, a Baptist church because you think, I'm not Baptist, or a Lutheran church, or a Presbyterian church, or a Methodist church. We got all these names, and you think, well, I'm not a Methodist, or I'm not a Baptist, or I'm not a Lutheran, I'm not a Missionary Alliance. And so you'll notice a lot of churches have dropped those titles that signify their belief system because it could be seen as a barrier from people coming. And so you'll see names like our church that I pastor, Mercy Church, or Compassion Church, or Mosaic, and you'll just see these kind of generic names because more and more people are saying, I just want a generic church. I don't want something so hyper-specific that it excludes me or everybody else. Number 2 is negative past experiences. In other words, if you've been in church anytime, if you've been there more than 6 months or 6 years, you will no doubt run into people that are just terrible. You will. I'm sorry to say it. I love people and I love the church, but you will find terrible people in a church just like you find terrible people at Walmart, terrible people at the airlines and the airport, terrible people at any job you have. You will find people that are just hard to get along with. And the church really has a problem because we're supposed to love these people no matter what. And so we love and accept people as they are, even though sometimes they are very awkward, uncomfortable, and hard to get along with. And, if there's not a good discipline structure or a good, leadership structure in place, sometimes these pinball wizards, and by that I mean they just bounce around creating chaos everywhere they go. These pinball wizards bounce around and create all kinds of problems and conflict, and sometimes there's really wolves in sheep's clothing. There really are, horrible, awful people, sometimes in the leadership of churches. People that don't care about other people. They'll say things like, I love the Bible, and I love God, and I love theology. I just can't stand people. And you're like, what are you doing here? You have to love people. That's part of the job. And you will find, even in leaderships of churches, perverts. You will find people that are just, corrupt, greedy, scandalous. You'll find all kinds of chaos in church leaderships. I hate to admit it, but it's like anywhere else you go where there are people. It shouldn't be this way. I'll be the first to admit it shouldn't be this way, but sometimes it is this way. And you might have just something totally corrupt like that you say, oh my gosh, I'm done. This is the third church we've attended where the pastor has run off with the secretary, or the pastor has, run off with the building fund. And you say, I'm just done. But it doesn't have to be that significant. It could just be you walk in and nobody greets you. And the people that are assigned to greet, they're talking to each other and laughing, and they don't really care that you're there. They don't give any impression that they care that you're there. Or every time you drop your kid off, they say, oh my gosh, he was such a problem. We almost called you out of service. And you just think, you know what? I'm done. You don't want my kids. You're not really happy I'm here. And every time I try to serve, you tell me, we're full, we don't need you, thank you anyway. Man, can you feel, I guess I have a lot more kind of like, as a 7, I tend to offload frustrations. I tend not to focus on it. But when I start talking about this, I think maybe there's a lot more frustration in there than I'd like to realize. Maybe I need some therapy. Okay, well, if you've been in churches, it's the best and sometimes the worst. It really is. And I'm just being honest. I'm trying to be honest about it. Again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying give up on the church. I'm saying I love the church. Let's try to make it better. If you've got a problem with it, then what can you do to help improve it? How can you get involved and try to improve it and make it better? If you walk away because it's got problems, are you going to walk away from your job? Are you going to walk away from your school? Are you going to walk away from, everything's got problems. You're going to walk away from your hospital or your doctor. He or she, your doctor, your dentist, they don't make you feel great either. They've got their problems and they have their losses as well. Okay, so let me get back on this. Negative experiences. Hear me again, if you are in a church long enough, you will have negative experiences. You would like to think it's going to be this cloudy, fluffy, wonderful place where everybody's going to have perfect intentions and they're all going to treat you right. They're all going to be nice and kind and loving all the time. And honestly, it's just not the way it is. And you can get very disillusioned. I mean, people go off to seminary or Bible college and they get a 4-year degree and they last 2 years in ministry because they find out these people, sometimes the leadership are eggheads, knuckleheads, coneheads, hard to get along with, not nice, not kind, not loving, and not mission oriented. They got their little kingdom, they got their little domain, and they do anything to protect that little bit of power they've got. And so you get disillusioned and you're like, what am I doing here? You know? Or they, the music, that's a big problem sometimes in churches. All right, number 3, lack of relevance. In other words, they're talking about stuff that doesn't matter. Oh my goodness, nobody cares. The Corinthian controversy, Chronicles of the Kings. They got these sermon series that are about something that isn't relevant to your life. And I get it. All of the Bible is important and all the Bible should be preached and all the Bible should be understood. I understand that. But the reality is people are not doing well. Families are not doing well. People are in crisis. They're about to get a divorce. They're hooked on internet pornography. They can't pay their bills. Their kids are on drugs. And they're in crisis. And then you show up to church and the preacher gets up there and talks for 30 minutes about the king of Babylon and whether that's a sign that means oil is going to go up. And you're like, what are you talking about? Nobody cares. Talk about real life. Talk about something that matters. The Bible has a lot to say about a lot of things. Can you please point out something that relates to my life? Now, let me say it this way. As an Enneagram Type 7, and I've got, a list here of each type and what drives each type nuts, I'll just say this lack of relevance is going to be probably said with this word. This is boring. This is boring. The music's not good, and we all clap like it's good and then the message doesn't relate to anything in life. It's nothing anyone's interested in. And if I say that out loud, then I'm the bad person. If I say that out loud, then I'm the one that's causing problems. But anybody who has any kind of connection to 7, like 8-wing 7, 6-wing 7, or 7s, is probably going to say the number one reason why I don't want to go to church is it's boring. It's boring. The preacher's out of date, doesn't relate to real life. They walk around in this flowing robe, burning incense, and what does that even mean? This isn't somebody I can relate to. This isn't somebody who has the same life experiences that I have. Do they live in an ivory tower? And so I want somebody with feet of clay. I want somebody that walks the same path I walk, somebody that I can relate to, somebody that makes sense, somebody that talks about real problems, that talks about sexual immorality, that talks about real stuff that people are going through, conflict in marriage, that kind of thing. Talks about health crisis. I want to see this person as a real human being that lives a real life and isn't perfect and struggles and fails and admits that and is honest about that. And that kind of gets to, some of the next points in here about being honest or fake. And let's get to number 4. Hypocrisy. Perceived hypocrisy. Hypocrisy means these people are not what they claim to be. These people are not what they appear to be. And at first, when you walk in, everybody's nice and kind and smiling and loving. And everybody looks like they got it together. And they got these big study Bibles. And they look like, they're using this language of, gosh, oh, Pastor, I was so blessed. The Lord bestowed upon me. He empowered me with the Holy Spirit and the Holy Ghost. And it's like they've got this language. They got this aura about them. And you think, man, what am I doing here? Because these people, they seem to be of like another level of consciousness than where I'm at. Can I really relate to these people? And then what happens? You go to a small group, you go to a Bible study, or you start serving and you realize, wow, yikes, these people are as messed up as anybody. And maybe worse because they're pretending like they're not. And they're lying about it. And they're deceptive about it. But I can tell, I can see it. I can watch them and I can realize these people, some of them are just fake. And that fakeness is going to feel like hypocrisy. Like they're They're telling you one thing about themselves and they're wearing this false face or this false mask, but in reality, like they're covering up all of this stuff in their life that is not good. And sometimes it can be the leadership of a church. And when you see this kind of thing, it's very disheartening. Whether it's just, the greeters at the front counter or the band members, or when you see the leadership of that church and you realize these people aren't genuine. Nobody wants to be around that. Nobody wants to be associated with that. Nobody wants to admit that. But hypocrisy or fakeness or falseness is a huge turnoff. Once you see that, once you see the corruption, if it exists beneath that surface, and realize most people that you meet in church, they're not really hypocrites. They're just believers that are having a hard time living out the Christian life. That's why we can't really do it on our own. We need the Holy Spirit's help, and thank God there's Jesus, because none of us do this perfectly. And I don't think most people in church are really trying to be hypocrites. They're just struggling to live the Christian life, and they're not doing very good at it. And it's so much better if we could just admit that. The world, I don't think, gets upset with us as believers because we're not perfect. It gets upset because we lie about it and pretend like we are, and we won't own the fact that we're messed up just like everybody else. It'd be far better if we said, oh yeah, look, you don't know the half of the story. What you see here on Sunday is just a little bit. I'm the biggest screw up in town. And this is biblical. This is what the Apostle Paul did. He said, I'm the least of all the saints. I'm the chief of all sinners. It's biblical for you to admit your failures, your shortcomings. Now, you don't need to air your dirty laundry. You don't need to tell us about your chaos in your life, all of it. Please don't. Don't highlight it and sensationalize it, but to own it and realize, man, I am a terrible sinner, but I have a wonderful Savior. Look what it does. It embraces the fact that I also need a Savior. But when you walk around pretending like you don't have any sin in your life, it's going to come across as judgmental. It's going to come across as hypocritical. We're all, in need of a rescue. We're all in need of a Savior. And to pretend like you've got it all together, well, it's not going to be hard for people to, if they spend any time with you at all, to realize you don't have it all together. And maybe your biggest sin is hypocrisy. Maybe your biggest sin is judgmentalism. So you get the idea. Perceived hypocrisy. Number 5, introversion or social anxiety. Now, what do I mean? I mean, not that the church is introverted, but that a person is so introverted or has so much social anxiety that it's just hard for them to be in the company of a big group like that, or to be in a small group where people can, will interact with you. If you've been to church and they've had that greeting moment where the pastor says, turn around and say hello to 3 people next to you, right? You may think, I'm not comfortable just shaking hands with strangers. And, let's face it, people have been through a lot. They've been through a lot of trauma. Some people have been abused and victimized, and they got post-traumatic stress disorder. They've got anxiety disorders. And it's hard sometimes for us to realize that these people have a hard time in groups. They have a hard time, being exposed like this in a large group or sometimes in a small group where people are going to interact with them and talk to them. Why are they talking to me? Why are they in my business? Why are they asking me all these questions? And for people that are extremely introverted or who have been, traumatized in the past, me walking up to them and slapping them on the back, how you doing? Good to see you. That can sometimes be overwhelming to people. They're not ready for that kind of interaction yet. So introversion and social anxiety. Number 6, busy schedules. Let's face it, people are just busy. They got a lot of stuff. We got a lot of stuff on our calendars. We got a lot of commitments that we're after. We got soccer practice on Sunday mornings with the kids. We got taekwondo. We got, play practice. You got your work. You got to go grocery shopping. And now it's the first of the year, so you're going to the gym. And you just kind of look at this and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't have any time to relax. I don't have any time to go out into nature or do anything. And now you're telling me that I got to give up every Sunday morning or I'm a bad person, and I'm just exhausted. And so people they're overworked, they're over-entertained, and they're exhausted, and they're tired. And if it doesn't seem relevant to you and the pastor's not talking about things that seem to really connect to your life, and the people are perceived as being hypocritical and judgmental, and you say, do I really have time for this? Do I really have the time, to make this commitment? And on top of that is they're always talking about money. And they want more of my time, and they want more of my money, and they want more of my, service. They want me to volunteer. They're chasing me down. Would you sign up for this? Would you sign up for that? Would you mind bringing this? Would you mind donating that? Yeah, I don't think I really have time for this. So busy schedules. Number 7, cultural or personal beliefs. People with differing cultural backgrounds or personal beliefs may not find a church that aligns with their perspectives, or may seem out of touch with their environment. And again, this could be a lot of things. It could be the doctrinal system of that church, but it could also just be the way these people express themselves. They could be holy rollers, and they could be too, elaborate and too, emotional for you, or they could be the frozen chosen, and they could be, so cold and dead. Like, I can't be associated with this. These people, they don't have any life. They don't have any excitement. They don't have any enthusiasm. Literally that word enthusiasm, it comes from a Greek word. It literally means God in you. It means that you are so filled with God that people can see it. And churches ought to be enthusiastic. I don't mean that they ought to be, places of chaos. Everything should be done in order, but churches and church people and church services should be enthusiastic. They should be passionate. And not everybody is comfortable with that, with them being enthusiastic and passionate, and they can be uncomfortable with that. So one of the reasons why people might not go to church is it just doesn't culturally connect with them. They come from a different culture. Now they moved here to America. They moved here to this new city. And, they miss the old ways. They miss the way the services were done back in their hometown, 20 years ago, whatever. Number 8, a discomfort with rituals or formality. And some churches are very high church, meaning they're very focused on structure and organization, and they follow that bulletin or they follow that liturgy to the T, and it's so formal that it kind of seems dead. And you may go to something like that, and there's reasons for it, and I can appreciate those reasons, but it's so structured that there's like no room for the Spirit to move. That's the way it might feel. Like there's no room for any kind of expression, authentic expression. It seems structured and ritualized and formal, which is kind of the opposite of, casual. And sometimes it might be perceived as being unmeaningful. It might be like, okay, you stand up at this time, you sit down at this time, you kneel at this time, you go up at this time, you come back at this time, you sing, you chant, you say these words, and, I did my thing, check, 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 and now I'm done. But what did it really mean? Well, it can be meaningful to a lot of people, but it may not be meaningful to everybody. They may feel like I'm just going through the motions here. All right, number 9, a lack of connection or community. And so you might love your church. You might love the services. You might love the pastor. You might love the messages. You might love the music, but you don't feel like I've got any friends here. And it can be hard making friends. Yeah, they're friendly. The people are friendly, but I don't really have any friends. And there's a huge difference between a friendly church and a church where you have friends. And so that's why small groups and those kinds of things are so important, and service teams are so important, because that's where you really build relationships. But if you don't take the time, or you don't know how, or you struggle with building relationships, you may become very disillusioned. And the first time there's any kinds of problems, or any kind of chaos, or any kind of challenges going on, you don't really have anything to keep you with that church, because you don't really have any community. You're not really a part of it. Your name is on their roll, but you're not really connected to the people in that church. If you ask people who've been to a church for more than 10 years, 20 years, what do they love about their church? They're not going to say the pastor. They're not going to say the music. They're not going to say, what are they going to say? They're going to say it's the people. It's the people. So it may be the pastor and the music that get you there and make you want to join that church, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the people and your connections with those people that keep you there and close the back door of that church. And if you have a hard time making those connections, or you've never, intentionally made those connections, or the people are just so weird that you can't really connect with them, then it may be likely that you eventually are going to sort of drop out or go away, and then that's just further going to make you angry because nobody reached out to you. I went there for 10 years, I quit coming, and because of COVID, and not one person called me, not one person reached out to me, not one person. I'm like, well, I'm sorry about that, and maybe that's my fault as a pastor, but also, like, don't you have any friends here? Oh, you don't? Because if you had friends, they would have reached out to you. And the reason they didn't reach out to you is because you've been friendly, but you've never really become friends with these people. Or they've passed away or whatever, they've moved on. Number 10, the last one on this list, is you have spiritual doubts or questions. Let's face it, I mean, our culture is not wired to create believers. Our culture is wired to deconstruct believers. If you go to the school system and then you go to the university system, they are designed in part to deconstruct your faith. Now, I know they don't see it that way. They just say, oh, we just teach facts. We teach the truth. Well, those facts and that truth is often in direct opposition to biblical facts or biblical truth. And so it's not unlikely at all for kids to go off to a university or, and if they, grow up on Hollywood and grow up on the music that, is normal in our society. The church is antithetical to all of that. And the belief structure and system of, take for example, that you're created and designed by God. And if you believe in something like a literal 6 days of creation and Adam and Eve and Noah's Ark and Jonah and the whale, I mean, these things, if you go to a university, they're not going to teach these things as facts. Let's face it. They're going to say this is all analogy. This is all hyperbole. This is all euphemistic language. From a bygone era where people, played fast and loose with the facts. And, kids are going to grow up in a culture that does not harmonize with their biblical worldview. It has a very secular worldview. And then they try to come to church and they're hearing a different worldview. And it's a vastly different worldview that doesn't align with the modern age. And so they may look at this as being, I have all kinds of questions. And I try to ask those questions of church leaders, and they tell me, don't ask questions, just have faith in Jesus. It doesn't really matter, creation, evolution. It doesn't really matter when life begins. It doesn't really matter, whether there's a spiritual world or not. Don't ask questions, just trust Jesus. And so you get people saying, I don't feel like these answers are credible, and they seem to go against, science or what's proven. And so they're sort of left with more questions than answers, and maybe there aren't a lot of answers given in the local church. And maybe it's because the leadership itself isn't trained to be able to answer those questions. All right, so there's a good, strong list of, yikes, I'm talking myself out of going to church here. So there's a good, strong list of 10 reasons why people probably might quit going to church or give up on it. And I'm sure if you've been a believer for more than, 6 months, if you've been in this for a long time, you've wrestled with all of these things. And yet you've still decided, yeah, but you know what? I'm still going to go. I'm still going to be a part of it. Every believer is going to go through these doubts or these questions just like anybody else. So there's 10 good reasons why people give up on going to church. Now, let's make this about the Enneagram. Let's go down the list, starting with type 1, and let's say, what possibly problems would a 1 have with church? Well, to me, it seems obvious. Corruption. 1's the perfectionist, the reformer, the moralist, the mentor, the teacher, the idealist. They're going to have some problems when they see corruption in the church, whether that's in the doctrines, because this church is playing fast and loose with the Word of God, or whether it's corruption in the finances. Oh, wow, this money was designated for children's ministry, but looks like it's being used for the parsonage, for the pastor's house. What's that about? Somebody needs to call this out. Somebody needs to answer for where these funds are going. And when ones see perceived hypocrisy, corruption, or behaviors that are unbecoming of a pastor or unbecoming of a professional, and they see that these people, they don't really live out their faith very well, I could see ones becoming very disillusioned with that particular church. So if they perceive hypocrisy or inconsistency in the church's teachings versus its actions, they might be frustrated as what they see as a lack of adherence to this set of standards or values. And so you might see ones get very disillusioned with church. Type 2s, the helper, the giver, the connector, the befriender. I could see 2s very often very involved in churches. I could see them getting very disillusioned because they're being taken advantage of, because they always show up, they always do a good job, they always smile and say thank you, and they make great hostess, they make great greeters, they make great children's workers, they make great volunteers, and so people just exploit them, and they don't feel appreciated, and they aren't thanked enough, and they aren't given the kind of gratitude that they deserve, their actions deserve, and they're taken for granted. And sometimes the people around them may not really care enough about them and know them by name. And I can also see where sometimes maybe 2s could become frustrated if the church gets too controversial, and we're talking about all kinds of controversial subjects, and there's some volatility, there's strong opinions being shared. I could see 2s saying, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't like the conflict. Like 9s, I don't like, everybody's at each other's throats, and we're going through a dark time right now, and this is not what I want to be a part of. So I would say the biggest reason, I think, is feeling unappreciated for their contributions. Or they show up to help and somebody says, no thanks, we've got it. Me and my bestie, we're already taking care of everything. We don't really need your help. What happens when you tell a 2 you don't need their help? Well, they're going to say, why am I here? I don't need to be here. They literally told me they don't need my help. Or another thing that could happen to 2s is somebody complain. And this could happen to 1s too if you criticize 1s. But if you complain and say, wow, Sherry was supposed to do such and such, but she really dropped the ball and she didn't get this done. And if a 2 feels like, oh, well, my service isn't wanted, or my service isn't. I always think of the trees in the Wizard of Oz. Are you saying my apples aren't what they ought to be? Okay, well then you know what? I tried to serve, I tried to help, I tried to take care of this, and they're telling me they don't want me. They're telling me that it wasn't good enough. They're telling me that they don't need me. So I'm done. I'm done. Or they could just get burned out. They work so much and serve so much that they just, and that's kind of like what I'm saying, is they're just not appreciated. They just burned out. Get tired of taking care of everybody, and nobody really knows them, and nobody really cares about them, and nobody really takes care of them. And so what am I doing here? Okay. Type 3s, the performer, the achiever, the superhero, the fantastic one. I could see them getting very discouraged and disillusioned with churches because they have no goals. They have no direction. The churches are just one Sunday after another, just trying to, keep the people they have and try to have good, services on Sunday, have decent music, decent messages, decent youth and children's. They're just trying to keep everything going. They're just trying to keep the wheels on the bus. And this 3 is back there saying, what are we doing here? Like, what's our purpose? What's our objective? What's our mission? To not go out of business? That's our mission, is to keep showing up, to not quit, to not give up. Well, that doesn't seem like a very, provocative mission. How do I become successful here? What is success? What's our objective? What's our big, hairy, audacious goal? Not quit. That's our goal right now, is just to not give up, to not get so disheartened that we just stop. And I can see a 3 just, getting disillusioned with this. It doesn't feel like we're really, going after anything significant here. And when you start talking about mission and objectives, and people get frustrated because they take it as an insult that, they haven't provided that. And they'll come back with something ridiculous like, our mission is to love the Lord, holding the Bible. That's what I'm doing. Our mission is to love the Lord and to be true to his word. You're like, yeah, I get that, but like, what's our long-term vision here? Okay, type 4s. I can see 4s, of course, anything that feels fake or insincere is going to rub 4s the wrong way. They're going to be able to read through the fake and phony stuff. And so I would say that's going to be a big thing. Social issues are probably going to be big. If the church takes a strong stand on something, some controversial issue like abortion, or some controversial issue like gay marriage or something like that, I can see 4s. It's got to feel true to them. They got to feel aligned with it. And if, they don't feel aligned with whatever position that church has, I can see them struggling. I could see 4s also being very focused on what is the mission or vision of this church. And if I don't feel like I can align with that, something's missing here. Something's missing. And that general sense that something's missing in my church could cause me to think maybe I don't belong here, or I don't fit in. And 4s have that general sense about themselves often that they don't fit in or they don't belong. And so they long to be a part of this group, yet always feel like they're on the outside or outliers. And they're longing for this connection or longing for this to be a part of this group, but they, for whatever reasons, might be made to feel, the way they might say it, made to feel like they aren't really a part of this group. They might find the church unappealing if it lacks authenticity or depth. They may also feel misunderstood. I tell you another big thing I think with 4s is when they come into a group or they finally get to speak up and they share some of their background or some of their struggles or some of the things that have happened to them, and rather than get a reception that they would hope of understanding, of support, and rather than being heard and listened to, they might just be corrected. Let me give you an example. The 4 comes into a small group and says, I struggle with depression. I struggle with, suicidal thoughts. I struggle with anxiety disorder, or I struggle with, a general sense of whatever it is, okay? Imagine that this 4 is opening up and sharing their truth and being honest and talking about what's going on in their life, and they get a response like this. Well, you know what your problem is see, you're not focused on the joy of the Lord. That's what you need to do. You're focused on all the negative here. And you need to realize, like, you had loving parents that loved the Lord and brought you to church every Sunday, and you should be grateful. Now, what's that 4 gonna feel? Not heard. They're not gonna feel, understood. They're gonna feel minimized and diminished by that kind of a response. And let me tell you, there's a world of people in the church ready with that kind of response. Because they don't want to be challenged themselves, and they're just telling you, well, you need to focus on the positive. You need to let that stuff go. You need to give it to the Lord. You need to give it to the Lord. You need to sacrifice it to the cross. Just drop it down at the cross and leave it with the Lord. And you need to focus on all the good that God, and it's not that it's a bad message. It's just not what a 4 is going to want to hear when they're trying to open up and share with you. And they'll just say, you know what, I'm done. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. All right. Type 5. This one's an easy one. A 5 comes in with all this depth of knowledge, information, and questions and challenges. And that's not what we want here in church. We don't want people to challenge us. We want to teach the lesson and everybody, apply it to their lives and then move on. Don't ask us a bunch of questions. We're not prepared to answer a bunch of questions. A lot of times in church settings, the teacher doesn't really want the students to ask tough questions or challenge them. They want you to hear my little lesson that I prepared in 30 minutes or less, and to all be touched emotionally by this little, lesson, this little sermonette, and everybody to, be impacted by this and move on out the door and come back next week and we'll talk next week. And then you got this 5 in the back of the room raising their hand and saying, well, actually, it wasn't Nebuchadnezzar. It was Tiglath-Pileser. Those are kings. Actually, that wasn't Saul, that was David. And, and you got this person challenging your facts, challenging your information all the time, challenging your worldview, asking tough questions. And again, the reality is sometimes teachers and preachers and Sunday school teachers and Bible study leaders, great people, but not necessarily prepared to answer all these questions. And then they feel threatened by these questions and they feel like they're being made to look a fool. And so then rather than respond, generously, they respond with shaming them for even asking these questions. Well, your problem is you need to just have faith. You need to just trust Jesus and have faith. And, I don't think there's any answers to these. I think there's just some questions that we can't answer. You want to drive a 5 crazy? Say stupid stuff like that. I think there's just some questions that just don't have answers. No, the questions do have answers. Just say, that's a good question, Bob. I don't really have an answer for that. Say that instead. But see, that can be hard to humble yourself. So instead you say, well, I just think there's some things we have to just accept by faith and we just never have an answer for. There's just no answers for it. No, there's an answer. God knows the answer, but maybe you don't know the answer. All right, number 6. Sixes. I love sixes, but sixes are sometimes a pain in the butt. Okay, I'm just being honest, right? Sixes in churches. There's a lot of sixes in churches. And sixes, they are your loyal supporters, the loyalists. By the way, 5s were the investigators, the observers. Okay, 4s, the romantics, the healers, the individualists. But let's move to 6. 6, the loyalist, the skeptic, right? And so 6s, they're awesome people. They build communities. They're great citizens, of the world, and they want to build this great community where everybody takes care of each other and everybody's there to support one another. But 6s, are your biggest fans and biggest supporters, but then they also can sometimes turn on you really quickly if they don't feel like, things are going the way they should. And that could mean something as small as they walk into the sanctuary and there's a Christmas tree in the sanctuary. Pastor, can I talk to you for a moment? I noticed there's a Christmas tree in the sanctuary. I was doing some research here, and it says that Christmas trees were actually started by the Druids in ancient Norse, ancient Britannia, as a pagan symbol. And I don't know that we should have these in our sanctuary. And you're like, oh my goodness. I love you, but nobody who comes to this church is associating Christmas trees with ancient pagan Norse mythology. We're just not. I don't know that we should have a harvest festival, Pastor, because that's associated with Halloween. Do you know that Halloween, the origins, it's like, oh my goodness. I get it. I understand. And there's no way that I, as a pastor, can argue for the sake of Halloween. There's no way I can. But what we're doing here for our community is we're trying to reach people who we might not ever reach on a Sunday morning service. And I get it that you're concerned and you're warning me of the potential threats and dangers of what we associate with, and I can respect that, but keep in mind the general focus of this harvest festival is not to glorify satanic, demonic creatures, but is to reach our community with something culturally that connects with them. And 6s could have a problem going to a church. If they go there long enough, there will undoubtedly be something that they feel might be objectionable or, corrupt in some way, like a 1 might feel like we're aligning ourselves with something we shouldn't be aligning ourselves with. I had a 6 one time. He was walking up to the church and we had a banner that said, worship together on the banner. And then we had another one that said, love together. And it was just this theme of together, right? And this 6-wing 5 walked up to me and he said, I don't know, I don't like these banners. I'm like, really? It has happy people on it, diverse people, like white people, black people, Chinese people, all these people on this banner, Hispanic people, there's 5 of these banners, and they all say study together, coffee together, fellowship together. This whole series of banners we got. I don't really like these, Pastor. I don't know about these. I'm like, what's wrong with them? Well, it's this word together. That's what Marxists use. That's what communists use. They try to move people into groups, move them together, and it's, and I'm like, wow, how do you see that? How do you see, our banners have been infiltrated by Marxism and communism? And at the time, I just remember thinking, what planet do you live on? Like, where is this coming from? Do you see communism in everything? And again, sixes, they tend to have that us and them sort of mentality. And so they're vigilant, they're watchful, they're mindful. And there's going to be something that comes up like that, somebody takes a song, for example, and they put Christian words on it. Well, I don't think we should use that kind of music. I don't think that music is, well, I don't think we should have, Christmas trees in the sanctuary. Well, I don't think we should be celebrating. Well, I don't think we should use those banners. Well, I'm not sure we should use that version of that translation of the Bible. I'm not sure about that translation of the Bible. I'm not sure about. And sixes will find something maybe that is enough for them to say, I can't be a part of this group anymore. Okay, type sevens. Easy, boring, church is boring. Easy. And I can't be involved in it. They don't want me to be involved. If I can't be on stage, then what am I doing here? I don't want to sit here and watch this show because this show is not as good as what I could watch on TV. This is boring and the messages are relevant, and let me be a part of it. Let me lead something. Let me do something. Let me be in the band. Sit down. Stop talking. Knock it off. Settle down. That's what a seven's going to hear in church. It's a good place to get in trouble. And so sevens might find churches too restrictive, too boring, preferring more stimulating experiences. I mean, sevens are the most likely to be addicted. It is the sex, drugs, and rock and roll type. Okay? I mean, it just is. And it's very hard to convince this person that sitting here in this service for an hour or 3 hours every Sunday is better than going out and partying all Friday night, partying all Saturday night. It's very hard to convince them of that. They are wired to be hedonists. And you're going to bring them into a place that challenges hedonism, that says, no, you should wait until you're married to have sex. No, you should only be with one person for life. No, you should say no to alcohol and drugs. And I think a seven's going to hear, this is a big list of saying no to stuff. And they're gone. And even if sevens commit, it's hard for them to stay committed to something. They get excited, super excited about something. And then where are they in 2 years? They've moved on to something else, or another church, or something else, another group. Type eights. Well, I think eights could get very disillusioned with churches because churches focus on needs that aren't necessarily the most important needs. We need to have backpacks for kids going back to school. We're going to collect school supplies, and we're going to make a huge difference in our community collecting school supplies for kids for backpacks. Hey, everybody, look at us. We just gave away 300 backpacks this year. And eights are, sitting back looking at this saying, what'd you do for kids with Down syndrome? What'd you do for the blind kids? What about the kids that are dying of cancer right now in the hospital? Anybody doing anything for them? Huh? And eights have this prophetic, not like they see in the future, but they just speak like a prophet. And they just call out BS. And sometimes churches are filled with BS. Look at us. Look at what we're doing. Everybody, just because of your generous support, we were able to make this impact, this wonderful difference, right? And it's a little bit salesy sometimes. Churches can be salesy. Look at us and look at what we're doing. Aren't you proud to be a part of this? You don't want to leave, right? Because look at how great we are. And eights see through all this crap and they're like, yeah, wow, we really made a difference. But what about those people over there? And so eights tend to call it out by, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about those that are on death row? What are we going to do about those in prison? What are we going to do about those mothers that, don't have any supplies to take care of their babies? What are we going to do about? And 8s, sometimes they just get excited about something and they get to moving things forward, and then you put them in a committee. And they got to, Martha, how do you feel about this? Sam, how do you feel about this? Well, I don't know if we should. And 8s are just going to lose their mind. Like, we can't get anything done because we got to wait until everybody's on the same page. And then, this 8 says, I think we should do this. I think we should do that. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. She's yelling at everybody. I'm done. And the 8 just says, I'm done. I'm done. We can't get anything done. The stuff they want to do is the stuff that isn't important. And then when I actually start moving forward, then everybody has a freak out and a heart attack because I said we need to do something now. And they get their feelings hurt. I'm done. All right, let's move on to type 9. 8s are the challengers. 9s, the peacemakers, the referees, the dreamers. I think 9s probably make up a large portion of churches. Because 9s will stick with things, and 9s, they tend to be easy to get along with. They have low demands, and even when they shouldn't belong to a church, sometimes they're still going. And you're like, this church is corrupt, man. This church is rotten. These people are awful. And yet the 9 just, well, I don't know, it's Sunday, so I keep going, and they just keep going to the same church over and over and over when maybe they shouldn't. So maybe 9s, you should ask yourself, why am I going here? Am I going here just because it's my tradition? It's my habit? Is there something greater than this? Is this really the right church for me? You should ask those questions. But I would say, why would a 9 give up and quit going to church? Well, maybe the church is coming across as very judgmental. Maybe they're taking a very judgmental or harsh stand about things. And a 9, I don't like that. I don't like it when we're so judgmental against this group or that group, or when we're so charged up about things that they want me to take sides. They want me to, to align with one way of seeing things. That could be hard for 9s. I think 9s could easily get burned out because they say yes when they don't really mean yes, and they keep volunteering for things, and they might be introverted and not make deep connections with others, but they keep serving and saying yes to things and showing up and taking care of needs. And then one day they miss church, or 2 weeks they miss church, and nobody reaches out to them because they haven't really made those connections, and they just get out of the habit, and they feel burned out and exhausted and tired, and they don't like the fighting, they don't like the conflict, and sometimes churches have conflict. Or again, they could feel like the church is being judgmental. They could resist going to church if they feel like it's a source of conflict or tension. And I might just say, remember, the sin of the 9 is sloth, right? And so just a general sense of, I'm tired. I don't want to go. I'm exhausted. I've been working all week. This is the only down day I have, to spend some time doing other things I'd like to do. I'm still in my pajamas. What am I supposed to do? I'm in my pajamas. And it's online now. So I'm still going. I'm watching it online. I'm online. Yeah, I'm online. I listen to 3 podcasts and listen to Bethel music online. I watch my church online. I still support. I still give. But you're not going anymore because it's convenient to just watch it online, which maybe you do once a month, or maybe you do it every week. But honestly, maybe those connections weren't really there anyway. So what a fantastic topic. What an interesting topic. Why we give up on going to church, and why it can be difficult for us, and then even thinking about how our Enneagram type sometimes influences us to maybe have a hard time staying committed to something that maybe we love and we care about, but hasn't been the priority for us. So I hope it gets you thinking. I hope it challenges you, encourages you. And, if the church you're going to is not what it should be, then that doesn't mean maybe you should give up on church. It just means maybe you should look for one that is warm, loving, honest. None of them are going to be perfect. That loves the Lord, loves the Bible, loves Jesus, loves people, and is more than just a show that you go to, one where you can actually be involved and serve. And remember, there's no perfect ones out there, but is there one that you could be involved in, where you could use your gifts and strengths? That's probably the best question you could ask is there one where I could be all that God wants me to be? Not one that just is what I like or meets, quote, my needs for entertainment, but is there one where I could show up and be useful and use my purpose to serve? Good stuff. Thank you guys. Take care and have a great new year. I'll see you guys next time. And as always, be present to life.